Oak Ridge Unitarian Universalist Church has a history to be proud of. You probably know that our founding was 70 years ago when a group of young adults got together and made the whole thing happen. But did you know that 60 years before that, another group of young adults was responsible for starting a Universalist church in Harriman, just west of us in Roane County? Here's how it happened. In the years after the Civil War, investors all over the country were looking to get rich quick by planting from scratch or making from scratch industrial cities throughout the South. For instance, Birmingham, Alabama was known as the Magic City because when people found the minerals that could make steel there and ran the railroad in, Birmingham grew up in 1870 almost overnight. A similar group of investors located a place between Knoxville and Nashville in what would become Harriman, where they wanted to build an overnight city, and they added something to it, as well as making money as industrialists and running the railroad through up to Cincinnati. They wanted this to be a model city for temperance. Now, the temperance movement was an anti-alcoholism, anti-domestic violence movement in the 1800s, and they wanted Harriman to be a model city to show what sober, clean living and community life could look like. One of the investors who was putting a lot of money into Harriman and who was really big into temperance was Fergus Schumacher. Schumacher had gotten rich in the Civil War by creating portable cereal, oatmeal, in a company that later became Quaker Oats. However, Schumacher himself wasn't a Quaker. He was a Universalist. In fact, he was such a proud and enthusiastic Universalist that he had given money to Universalist colleges and scholarships and institutions, and he wanted to make sure that the town of Harriman, the town that temperance built, had a strong Universalist presence. In fact, he chose the very best piece of property in Harriman right at the top of the hill where a Universalist church would be built. Now, around the same time, the Universalist Church of America was starting to worry about its young adults. You see, the young adults didn't seem to want to go to the programming or the events or the fellowship activities that the older people had planned for them. This may be a perennial problem from generation to generation where young adults don't seem to want to do what older people plan for them. But the older people in the late 1880s came up with a solution for this. They said, well, we're going to give the Young People's Christian Union, which was the Universalist young adult group at the time, we're going to give them a project. And so, sure enough, for the next 2 or 3 years, the YPCU, the Young Adult Universalists, began raising money all over the country, all of it to go to this new church in Harriman. Sure enough, on Easter 1891, when Grace Universalist Church opened up, not only did it have the best piece of property in town because of Ferdinand Schumacher, not only did it have a beautiful building because of all the fundraising that young adults had done all over the country for it, but it also had one of the best preachers in Universalism. William McLaughlin had taken the train down from Rochester, Minnesota, and he was going to be installed as the minister of Grace Universalist Church in Harriman. Decades later, William McLaughlin would be the president of the denomination, the general superintendent of the Universalist Church of America, so he was already an up-and-comer and had a lot of big ideas. However, less than 2 years later, in 1893, across the country there was an economic crash, a depression, and that pretty much stopped the town of Harriman in its tracks. Then, a few years after that, the young man who had been groomed to become the new preacher for Grace Universalist Church tragically died in a rowboat accident on his honeymoon. With this streak of bad luck, by 1900, Grace Universalist Church was pretty much running on fumes. They tried to turn it into a hospital, a Universalist hospital in Harriman in World War I. In the 1920s, they turned it into a progressive school for children in Harriman. But by 1930, they had sold the building for scrap lumber to Christmas Lumber Company, which is still in business in the Harriman area, although the Universalists, of course, are not. Until now. Now, today, you're hearing about the Roane County UU Fellowship, or ROOF, where, again, young adults from Roane County, from this area, are coming together to dream up and imagine and put together a liberal religious community that is by them, for them, and serving the community. So this proud tradition of young adults, whether it's in the late 1880s or the late 1940s or now in the 2020s, that seems to be how Unitarian Universalism is planted and thrives here in East Tennessee. May the Roane County UU Fellowship be blessed with the good fortune and grit that Oak Ridge UU Church received, and not so much the bad luck that Grace Universalist Church received. That's the story for today.